What's up, everybody, and welcome to Early Edge Primetime. We've got the Bengals, we've got the Jaguars. We appreciate you joining us. Hit the like button. Thanks for coming in to this show on Monday night. It's Sia, it's the counselor. Coach will be back tomorrow. But enough about me, enough about Coach. Let's get into the stars of the show. Let's meet who we have today. And I got to say, I am pretty excited that we are bringing back, hopefully for good, the person who hit the gem on her first try. I got to start there. Sorry, Coach Phil. I got to start there.
I don't care if you start there or not.
Oh, you totally care. I know you care, Coach Phil.
Doesn't bother me at all.
Ken's, listen, is this your first time back since hitting that first touchdown last week?
Yes, so a lot to live up to here. I'm hoping we can go back to back and make some history right now.
And I know
AB did 3 in a row.
Oh,
yeah, well, speaking of history, I mean, we can talk about where I'm at too. But like, listen, we don't need to go there right now. Everybody, thanks for being in the chat. Thanks for joining us. I see Buckets is already in the chat, and if you didn't see the 10 o'clock a.m. show, well, he's got some no-fly zone picks, which I'm sure we'll be talking about during this show. By the way, speaking of the Jaguars and the Bengals, all odds powered, of course, by BetMGM. Let's get it started. You know how we get this show started. We always go to Coach Phil's keys to the game. We always start with the visitors. Coach Phil, let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengal keys to the game.
Yeah, the biggest question is, can the Burrowless Bengals keep the playoff hopes alive? I mean, they're going to need Joe Mixon to have a great day. The big physical backs have to control the line of scrimmage. But last week, he only had 8 carries against Pittsburgh. Jake Browning is in. He had 227 yards, a touchdown, a pick, and a 96.2 rating. He's not just a serviceable backup. This is a quality backup, and he's excited to play football tonight, and they're excited to see what he can do. They need to protect this guy. The offensive line has to play really, really good. He does not have the anticipation of a Joe Burrow, so they need to protect him well. Get the ball to Jamar Chase would be very, very important. T. Higgins is back, and they're going to need him. The second thing is, can Lou Anarumo contain this Jacksonville offense? Schematically, Lou's one of the best in the business. Confusing, complex, all the different variations of blitz, and then drop, all the different coverages that you could see. But is it going to be enough to contain Trevor Lawrence? That's just a question. They're holding receivers to an 82 rating, which is 7th in the NFL, but they're allowing a 114 to tight end. So Evan Ingram's going to be a huge factor tonight, most likely statistically, when we look at the numbers. All right. Trey Hendrickson, one thing to look at. He's going to be going up against backup tackle Walker Little because Cam Robinson is out. I talked to Lou Anarumo earlier in the week. He said they got to stop the run, rush the passer, and then they're 5th in the NFL in turnovers, and they need to continue to get Jacksonville to turn the ball over tonight.
Yeah, and Trevor Lawrence is no stranger to turning the ball over here and there. Trey Hendrickson is an absolute menace on the defensive line. AB, what you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note real quick. Phil let this one just go right through because that's his style. I like that Phil's talking to the actual coaches that are in this game of his keys. It kind of gives a
subtle flex.
Yeah, like it's awesome. Like it gives a little bit of credibility to exactly.
He sent me a little Travis Scott before about 3 hours ago too. That was his mood for the game. So Lou's a cool dude. He's a cool dude, man. He's
going Houston on this one.
He's the man.
Coach Phil, Lou seems like one of the defensive coordinators that everybody always talks about. In the NFL, we're always talking about offensive coordinators. We're always talking about Kyle Shanahan or whoever it is, Bill Belichick, Sean McVay. But defensive coordinators don't typically get talked about. There's a handful. And Lou Anarumo, I feel like, leads that list.
I agree with you, and it's because first of all, he's good, right? He need to be good. So statistically, he's always up there where he needs to be. But just likability factor, he relates with the players. I went to training camp for 3 days this summer, and I just saw like the way that defensive players, all of them, they love him, And I think that's a huge thing when you're talking about being a head coach. It's everyone wants the Ben Johnsons and everybody who is offensive coordinators who are dynamic, but just the likability and getting guys to play hard. Lou is awesome, and I wish he would get a shot.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. Is he trying? Like real quick, is he trying to get a shot as a head coach?
Yeah, he was involved with Arizona last year, and they went with Gannon. And he was the final candidate. So, I mean, they're not – how it is. If the quarterback, Burrow's out, if they don't win 10 games, it's hard to hire a defensive guy, with the way the NFL hiring cycles have been with head coaches. But Lou's a stand-up guy, and he's one of the best DCs in the entire NFL.
Absolutely. Oh, that's 100% true. Okay, let's get to a couple picks on the Cincinnati side before we get to the Jaguar keys to the game from Coach Phil. I'm going to start. If you watch the 10 a.m. show, if you remember SportsLine, you already have this pick. It's at plus money, really across the board. I have Jake Browning over 21.5 pass completions, and Coach Phil talked about it. Jake Browning, listen, I'm not going to say he's like a great backup quarterback, but I think he's pretty good. I mean, this is a guy who played at Washington all 4 years, and he's been really kind of holding the clipboard, or these days holding the iPad, for a few years now. And I think he has experience. And I honestly think pre-snap, he's really good about understanding what the defense is doing. And I think this Jaguars defense, it's not super formidable in the secondary, but more important to this completion prop that I have, over 21.5 completions, is that what we noticed last week was short air yards. He's not throwing the ball down the field, and that's by design. The ADOTs from all of these receivers, whether it's Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, you're going to see them kind of bringing it in a little bit to help out this offense, to help out Jake Browning. So that's why I have the over 21.5 pass completions. The thing I liken it to is about 6 weeks ago when Tyson Bagent was starting for the Chicago Bears. His first full game, if you recall, on this very show, I had his over in completions. Mind you, it was down to, I think, 19.5 during that particular one, but he smashed it because of the same thing, because they weren't throwing the ball down the field. They were basically using the pass game as the run game. I think that's the only way Cincinnati can succeed in this game, especially with Mixon likely being relatively inefficient on the ground. So give me Jake Browning over 21.5 pass completions. Again, this is a plus number at whatever book you're at. So again, if it's 20.5, take that, obviously, but there's not many books offering the 20.5. So that's my pick for tonight. I have a couple leans that I'm going to get into later, but Kenzie, I know you've got a pick on this game too, and frankly, it correlates kind of well with my Jake Browning pick.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was thinking too. And you mentioned the Mixon inefficiency on the ground. I think it all leads to Jamar Chase here. It feels like a simple bet, but I really like him over 55.5 receiving yards. Our model makes it 72. And I think the reason why is this Jags pass D ranks 24th in yards per attempt allowed. So I think the secondary is going to have some trouble. Secondary is a little bit banged up as well. And on top of that, now you have T. Higgins as another factor that they have to worry about tonight. So I think that bodes well for Jamar Chase. Not all the attention is going to have to be on him. He has T. Higgins to take away some of that secondary. And I'm hoping that they're playing from behind in the second half. We're going to see the ball in the air a lot. Again, like you mentioned, Mixon not being as efficient. I think Browning is going to want all the reps he can get. He's going to play through the fourth quarter, looking to get some reps with his receivers here. I think Jamar Chase is going to be on the other side of that ball a ton.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. He was certainly a target last week, and with T. Higgins back, maybe that opens things up even more for Jamar Chase. Coach Phil, what you got?
I couldn't agree with Kenz's pick more. He had 4 for 81 last week with Browning. They're only going to get better. T. Higgins coming back does offer a complimentary side. They probably are going to have a negative game script. Kenz, you nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally nailed it. Again, as usual. Okay, so we've covered the Bengals, at least somewhat, in terms of some of our official picks. Coach Phil, now let's cover the Jaguars' keys to the game.
Sure. I think Jacksonville, we have to talk about, do they have the talent on the offensive side of the ball to have a deep run in the playoffs and possibly win the Super Bowl? That's something we can ask ourselves tonight by watching the game. All right, Trevor Lawrence, let's talk about him. He has got rare traits: size, speed, arm strength, leadership, intelligence, one of the best in the league. Love watching this guy. 364 and a touchdown last week. 1 pick, a 90.2 quarterback rating. Really, only the Chiefs and the 49ers defense have stopped this guy. He has been lights out pretty much all year, but he will turn the ball over from time to time. But he is gifted, and he really can do a great job tonight against this Bengals defense if he uses his weapons. Those weapons we're talking about are Calvin Ridley, real fluid, explosive, 89 yards and a touchdown last week. Probably going to be right around those numbers again. Christian Kirk's coming on. He had 89 yards as well last week. Etienne, love this guy's versatility. Catch it, run it, fluid, strong, physical. I can shake you out. I like this guy a lot. And then Evan Ingram is the last weapon I'll talk about. Speedy tight ends are really tough to cover, and the Bengals have not done a great job against tight ends this year. The second key to the game for the Jacksonville, can the Jacksonville defense continue to disrupt the opposing quarterback? Let's talk about Josh Allen first and foremost. This guy is like the predator out there. I mean, he had 2.5 sacks last week, 4 quarterback hits, 2 tackles for loss. Jacksonville is 6-0 when he has a half a sack or more in any game this year. They're third in the NFL with 19 takeaways. They're allowing 20.5 points per game, which is 12th, and then third in the NFL in rushing, only giving up 87 yards a game. This is a fast, physical defense that's looking to create chaos tonight.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, Josh Allen doesn't get the respect he deserves. I wonder if it's because he shares a name with the Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills. I mean, if his name was something like Max Crosby, who, by the way, doesn't get enough attention in his own right, like maybe he'd get more attention. I know that sounds silly, but he truly is a menace. I just talked about Trey Hendrickson on the Cincinnati side. Josh Allen's amazing.
Totally agree.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, we've got a couple of picks to talk about on the Jaguar side. I'll just mention Maestro. If you watch the 10 o'clock show, he had Evan Ingram over 41.5 receiving yards. I think this has really risen in a lot of places. Another reason to be a SportsLine member, because you would have gotten that number early. But Kenzie, I think you have a pick on the Jaguar side as well. What you got?
Yeah, and I'll say to the Maestro there too, I liked looking into that. By the time I got around to it, the steam was just all over him. I did put on the SportsLine website. I like him anytime touchdown. Again, I know this isn't one of my official picks, but we did talk about him having a great night. He hasn't had his touchdown yet. There might be some flexibility in this game for it to happen to him. He had 2 designed runs for him in the end zone last week that didn't work out. But nonetheless, we're going to Trevor Lawrence. This goes along with AB's pick too, but we're going over 13.5 rushing yards here. Perfect time to buy low on him. Didn't have any rushing yards last week, but 2 rushing touchdowns. Our model makes this number closer to 21. So we know he's comfortable using his legs this season. I think it's been one of his biggest improvements here. Bottom 3 team, the Bengals defense in the league in yards allowed to quarterbacks on the ground. He's been averaging over 21 yards on the ground this season. Again, Travis Etienne, maybe he's not 100% in this game. Maybe that opens up some situations for Trevor Lawrence to take command on his own on the ground. I like him. I like the over 3.5 carries as well, but I think the rushing yards will work out here too.
I think this is such a smart pick. I absolutely love when you're getting a number partially because it's discounted from whatever the market has a bias on from a recency bias standpoint. And you mentioned it, Kenzie, last game, not having the requisite, or in the last couple of games, maybe it was the last game, not having the requisite rushing yards, and you get that discount. You know, he's a guy, if you look at the season stats or if you look at the sample size from the last 5 or 6 games, it's a completely different story. It's part of the reason I went to Christian Watson yesterday in his rushing and receiving stats, because I was looking at the upward trend from last week and from the weeks prior, not necessarily from the full season stats. So absolutely love the Trevor Lawrence play. I love the concept of stock, maybe being just down a touch enough to get a discount on the number for Trevor Lawrence. All right. Well, listen, I think I was going to cover something. You did mention something before we get to the no-fly zone. You did mention something about Travis Etienne and kind of being banged up. We know he had that questionable tag. He's got a rib injury. I want to point this out because not all books have this. Some books are kind of withholding D'Ernest Johnson props for whatever reason. But I think if you have a D'Ernest Johnson number in terms of his rushing yards, which I think a lot of markets have at 19.5 or 20.5, I like the over there for 2 reasons. One is the Cincinnati Bengals defense isn't super formidable against the run. And 2, if we have a positive game script like a lot of people anticipate, there's no reason for D'Ernest Johnson, now the backup for Jacksonville, not to get an extra 1 or 2 carries off what he's done the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, he's gotten 7 carries in each game. In this game, especially knowing that Etienne has just a little bit of a lingering issue, we could see 8, 9, 10 carries. And against Cincinnati, he gets over that total like pretty easily. Some books don't have the D'Ernest Johnson prop, but something to point out there. Coach Phil, any thoughts on that? I know Kenzie probably has some positive thoughts on what I just said, but any thoughts from you?
Yeah, the two, I think Trevor could go over that in the first quarter if he gets flushed at home. He has good speed. With running backs that are listed as questionable, like just think about Christian McCaffrey, right? He gets listed as questionable half the time. And then like Elijah Mitchell doesn't touch the ball for the whole game. So I never know anymore how questionable is questionable unless I was at practice on Thursday and I could see them run around. If he does, then so for me, it's like, it makes perfect sense. I understand what you're saying, but it's more of a live situation for me to monitor how he looks. And then if he's like 1 or 2 carries and out and here comes D'Ernest, load up.
So here's the differentiator, because I love the Christian McCaffrey example, because listen, Kyle Shanahan's just going to put Christian McCaffrey in. I mean, they could be up 14 and he's on his 22nd carry and he's just going to be in the game. Like I get that, but Elijah Mitchell really never gets any run because of that. In this case with Jacksonville, we have a sample size of the last 2 games where not only is D'Ernest Johnson jump tank Bigsby, but he's actually getting 7 rush attempts a game. So I feel like in this game, especially against Cincinnati, we have that as a potential baseline. Even though he hasn't been
7, if he gets
even though
7
he hasn't been
carries.
right, He hasn't been super efficient with the 7 over the last 2 games, but I expect the efficiency to tick up a little bit against this Cincinnati Bengals rush.
I agree. I agree. If he gets 7, I think you'll get it.
Exactly. And honestly, I'm going to call it. I think he's going to get 9 rush attempts in this game.
That's
I'm
a good
throwing
one.
that out there. Game script could provide that for us. All right. I know a lot of people have been waiting for AB, your no-fly zone. And it's not, we always talk about how the no-fly zone is it's not just about INTs, but also we're kind of doing your whole thing here a disservice because you have some picks too that aren't necessarily associated with the no-fly zone. So finally, AB, the floor is yours.
I appreciate it. Yeah, dude. And you're right. In regards to the no-fly zone, I mean, we're going to get into Jake Browning right now. We've charted every single pass that he's thrown this season. All right. All the film, all of it. Because everyone's asking, how the hell do you bet the Bengals? Because you just don't really know. Mm-hmm. And also, I'll say this. In regards to, Ernest, what you were talking about, watch the first quarter, watch specifically third downs. Who is in on pass protection? All right, because if you've got a rib injury for Travis Etienne, you're not going to put him out there time after time after time. And when you see a quarterback like Trev who can check down from a pass down to a run, you could steal opportunities right there. So something to pay attention to. But let's get to Jake Browning here because this is the Jake Browning experience. All right, this is it. This is what his offense is, okay? So you see the top left, if you're new to the no-fly zone, that is the Jaguars secondary completion percentage rankings across the NFL. Below it, interception simulations, all right? We have him at 96% to throw a pick. Bottom left, some stats right there. But 2 TDs, 1 INT. We don't really need to break that down, all right? What we do want to take a look at is this offense and what the Bengals have done so far with them. And again, understand, very, very, very small sample size. But it's exactly what Sia said. It's exactly what you would expect. Very safe, very low risk. 10 yards and in, kind of the same thing we talked about last night. You don't want to make a big mistake. Now, you take a look at his touchdown pass that he has, one of them at least on the season. Right there, it was in the red zone, right at the line of scrimmage. Interception, same spot. That being said, look at the red zone. All of his stats have been in the red zone. He's not throwing deep, all right? 2 touchdown passes, 1 interception. His 1 interception came, weirdly enough, when he's playing from ahead. So what does his no-fly zone look like? Quite frankly, it's getting him out of his comfort zone, okay? It's throwing deep. It's if they're playing from behind. But Ken's brought up arguably the best point that you're going to have not only tonight, but the rest of the year on Jake Browning. These reps are unbelievably valuable. You cannot buy them. Each one is important, even if they're losing, right? If you're losing by 40 points, Coach Zach Taylor could just tell you, look, 0-0, I want you to just get better. Focus on running the offense. Let's try some things out and get better. Excellent point from Kins right there. So even if they're way, way, way behind, they're going to continue to run their offense and play because every rep is so incredibly, incredibly important. Now, let's jump over the other side here. Trevor Lawrence, not a whole lot we really need to break down. He's not necessarily Mahomes, but it's kind of the same thing of what we talked about last night, all right? Trev's a vet. He gets it. He understands it. Now, his chart isn't Patrick Mahomes. He can get into trouble deep left, deep right, especially in the middle. Interception simulation, SportsLine, we have him at 86%. Watch first down with Trevor Lawrence and this offense. He's not thrown a pick on first down all season long. He's lethal there, and he's throwing as well. It's not like they just run every time on first down. What he does is he keeps his team ahead of the chains. So watch first down tonight. Red zone, 6 TDs, 1 pick again. Bengals secondary, pretty darn good. Better than you think it is. Defense is better than you think it is. But again, it's all about getting Trev in trouble, making him make a mistake. So I'll pull that down. I've got 3 picks on here. Let me pull it up. And I don't know how this image is going to work on the 4 screen, but you know what? BetMGM, we're going to have some fun with it. Let's let it rip. All right. Christian Kirk over 50.5 receiving yards. Yep. I'm cutting myself off in half over here. I like Kirk. You take a look at him. His last 3 games, he's had 24 targets from Trevor Lawrence. And not only does he get volume, he could go deep as well. So you're getting both of those. I like him over 50.5. Travis Etienne, we spoke about him. Rib injury, questionable. Feels right. Who knows? Do not know unless you are there at practice. That being said, if he's starting, he's obviously okay. All right. Now, How does that play out for the full game? We'll see. But I think that Etienne actually could have a really, really special game tonight and go off and knock these yards out. Lastly, Trevor Lawrence over 3.5 rush attempts, minus 120. And I'll pull that down. Kins absolutely nailed it in regards to the Bengals defense against quarterbacks. And number 2, the yardage. Quite frankly, I wish I was on the yardage play as well. That's a great, great, great look from there. And again, you know how we get down with it. We don't count on kneel downs as well, but they do count as rushing attempts. But Trev, quite frankly, should get this in the game, especially if there are issues with Etienne. Trev will take it as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. And in fact, you took Patrick Mahomes was the favorite yesterday. They didn't end up winning, but you took that rush attempts prop, and we talked about the yardage prop, and both ended up coming in, if memory serves. So that certainly was good. Coach Phil, any response to the no-fly zone?
Yeah, so talking about Jake Browning, AB, I thought you just do work every weekend with these graphics, new quarterbacks. I mean, unbelievable job with these graphics. I mean, it's painstaking. I've done these Visio things, and it is brutal. But to have to do on the new quarterbacks all the time, outstanding work, my man. The one thing about Jake Browning is that Zach Taylor played the quarterback position. He's a traditional West Coast offense guy. He's going to give him a lot of quick game stuff, a lot of screen stuff. But when you get in that red zone, the anticipation I was telling you about is important. And that's when the pick came up. If you're from behind and you got to force a ball on third down or in 2-minute situations, or you're down by a couple of scores, picks can also happen too. So I expect Browning to get out to a nice controlled start and then see where the game script goes from there. Switching over to Trevor Lawrence, I have less to say about Trevor, but I think it's important to note that he's an extremely gifted player, but most importantly, he's coachable. So when they try to tell him where to go with the football, oftentimes that's where the football goes. One thing to think about, though, is Lou Anarumo has absolutely befuddled Josh Allen, and they are very similar style quarterbacks. So does Lou have a similar game plan where he could confuse Trevor and create some turnovers? That would help the Bengals stay in this, like we watched last night. How many times have we been on these primetime shows and said, oh, this is going to be a landslide, and all of a sudden we're sitting here and it's a barn burner the other way? And it usually has to do with turnovers, right? So that's some of the narratives that we can talk about in a game that looks like it's going to be Jacksonville, but don't be surprised if there's a pick or two that we're talking about the Bengals pulling one off and staying in the playoff hunt.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Like these predictable games tend to be unpredictable. But what is predictable, especially on Monday Night Football, for some reason, I believe they're 13-1 to the under, which maybe is part of the reason you're seeing the total as low as it is. Like, I think the markets or the books are like really adjusting to that, because we're seeing 40.5, 41 at BetMGM, Allen. So that's, I don't know. Like I'm laying off the total there. I do want to point out, by the way, a couple of things. One is we have 1,000 more people than we have likes. 1,000 more. Not that we have 1,000 much. We have more than that. We have 1,000 more people than we have likes. So because I'm hosting, I want to plead to you that I really want to throw it in Coach's face that we got more likes than any primetime show that he's done. So if everybody could hit the like button, I'd really appreciate it. And by the way, if you didn't watch the 10 a.m. show, shame on you. But I did mention Evan Ingram over 41.5 receiving yards, which came from Maestro, which came from SportsLine, of course, where he put that. But he also has Joe Mixon under 49.5 rushing yards at minus 115. So keep that in mind too. Those are some of the official plays you can find on SportsLine, among others, for this game. Where can you place these bets? I just mentioned BetMGM, and new BetMGM customers can sign up today and get $200 in bonus bets. Just place your first wager of at least $10 and you will receive $200 instantly in bonus bets, regardless of your wager's outcome, with bonus code EDGE200. Again, that's bonus code EDGE200. Now, before we get to the gem and maybe lob a couple of questions out with respect to some of the receivers, I have a question I want to ask about T. Higgins to the whole crew. But
sure.
We have a fun little game here, AB, and I think you might have a graphic for it. Let's pick a parlay. Let's pick a same game parlay. Now, listen, these are just three that we've picked here, and listen, you can make your own. They can trend toward the unders, as opposed to most of these trend a little bit towards the overs. These can be fun, and frankly, you can adjust the totals to make them reasonable as well, just like this plus 130 play, which of course is 225 plus passing yards for Trevor, 1 plus passing touchdown, 50 plus for Calvin Ridley. That's plus 130. We've got this one plus 270, and then a bigger one at plus 550. I'm going to kick it to all of you and just see what you like best. Kenz, I'm going to start with you, but I'll tell you what, looking at this, my take here is maybe the plus 270 play. I'm adjusting the line down to 5.5. I've got the 1+ interception with Browning, which I'm kind of counting on. I think he'll have an okay game, but that doesn't mean he's not going to turn the ball over. And I don't think 30+ pass attempts is something that's out of the question for Trevor Lawrence. I think that's a completely fair number. So plus 270 there, I kind of like. How about you?
Yeah, I hate to mention the same one, but I do like that a lot. Again, AB had it in the graphic that the SportsLine model gives him a 96% chance to throw an interception here. So that is a lot of good value there. Again, I like the pass attempts. I think they'll be flexible and comfortable. Hopefully Trevor has enough, opportunity to run and both pass the ball. So I do like the plus 70 there. I do love the plus 130 as well. I get scared of Calvin Ridley personally. We never really get along in the betting world. So I'm going to stay with the plus 270 here. Don't love the plus 550 just because I'm not really high on Etienne last night. I don't really know how many carries he's really going to have here. So I'll stay with plus 270 myself.
Yeah, AB, before I get to you, Calvin Ridley's kind of a mystery. I mean, he was completely blanked in the first half last game, and then he went off in the second half. And I think that's really what you get from Calvin Ridley. Like Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Etienne, they're always sort of in the game plan throughout the game, but you never know when Ridley's going to be in the game plan. He's a part of these same game parlays. Is there one of these three that you like?
Quite honestly, I kind of dig all of them. I think the plus 270 is probably like statistically the best way to go. I'm going to roll with the 550, right? I like Etienne anytime touchdown because I do believe, I don't think Trev has thrown more than 2 touchdown passes in a game this season, right? I think it's been 2 max that he's done. They run the football down there, all right? Doug Peterson, one of my favorite coaches in the NFL, he runs the football in the red zone, right? Again, 60+ rushing yards. We have unbelievable value on Etienne at SportsLine here. Yeah, rib injury, but you know what? I think that this dude could have a special night tonight. Kins is exactly right on Ridley, right? Like, I think that's the big question is 50+ receiving yards because he could go for 120. He could go for 20, right? Like, you just don't know what you're going to get with the guy. Like, Christian Kirk has been pretty consistent, but again, the Jaguars absolutely have something to play for. They win the night. They are the number 1 seed, at least for this week, in the AFC. And you have the Houston Texans behind them in the AFC South that just keep winning games, right? So they can't sit on their laurels. They have to keep going. So I dig the plus 550, but yeah, plus 270, like that might be the best way to go.
Fair enough. Coach Phil, you got to take on either of these three.
I would just take the first with a plus 131. I think those are nice round numbers. I think if you expect the Jags to go out and be in a competitive game, then you're going to cash this one. I mean, some of the other ones, it's like a landslide, where I think this is it could be back and forth and it could hit a number of, by the third quarter.
I totally agree. I mean, I think if you're going to get there with Trevor Lawrence's passing yards, I think there's going to have to be some resistance from the Cincinnati Bengals with respect to their offense. I know that's kind of counterintuitive. What I'm trying to say is if the Bengals can put up any semblance of points, like 13, 14, 17 points, it's probably going to require, not definitely, Etienne could just sail throughout the whole game. It may require Trevor to actually pepper his receivers. We know he's going to hit Ingram here and there, probably Kirk, probably Ridley. But if this is a back and forth, I mean, obviously that 250, or I should say 225 with the plus 130 same game parlay certainly makes a lot of sense. Before we get to the gem, I want to ask about T. Higgins, because that's probably the main player that we haven't talked about. We've touched on most of the sort of the big name players here. Outside, we haven't talked a bunch about Joe Mixon, but we have some bets on SportsLine and a bet I just mentioned about him. I'm off all Joe Mixon props, but T. Higgins, I think, is interesting. He comes back from a hamstring injury. He should be incorporated in a big way into this offense, I think. I don't think he'd be coming back if he was just going to be like a decoy on a team that probably isn't going anywhere. He's in a contract year too. So I think he's got a lot to prove. He got a lot of praise from Jake Browning just this last week. His receptions prop is 3.5. That's the one I'm kind of focused on. It's at plus money. It's basically even money at plus 100. Kenz, I'm going to go to you. Do you have any take? I know you like Jamar Chase. Does that also mean you like T. Higgins, or are you just so invested in Jamar Chase you don't want to speculate about any other pass catchers?
It's tough because I think it would come down to that fourth quarter and they're just trying to get their reps in. And T. Higgins is obviously one of those guys that is trying to get himself going again. So, maybe that could hit. We make the number 3.9. So I don't see a ton of value necessarily. Depends what kind of juice you can get. I feel more confident in them using Chase as a safety net first. Higgins starts to come in, but I certainly would not be surprised by the end of the fourth quarter that starts to play in.
AB, your take on T.
Yeah. Look, I think Ken's hit on something perfect in regards to anything T. Higgins. And Phil, I'm going to throw this as a question to you. How many reps have Browning and Higgins had in practice? If Higgins has been injured and Browning has generally been with the 2s and 3s while Joe Burrow was there, right? Like, how much continuity do they have, right?
You know what's interesting about that question is that when I was at training camp, Burrow was out with a calf. So the guy who was taking the reps was Browning. And the person who was catching a lot of balls was Irwin. And I just thought of that when you said that. But just in general, they have repped together quite a bit because of Joe's injury history this year. They had a long, they finished this drive, and I was impressed by how well the 12 play sequence that I watched live at practice. I'm like, man, this Browning kid can play pretty well, and he was finding all of them in rhythm. So the only issue I have is hamstrings, right? The positive is he's in Florida. It's not Cincinnati, so a little bit more weather. You can get it heated up a little bit more, but hamstrings are so unpredictable. I mean, you've had a hamstring before. 2 weeks later, you feel great. You go out again and pop it again. And
one play. One play. And I got to go.
And it's tough. Hamstrings are so tough. And I can feel my right hamstring tightening up just talking about it right now. But they pop like triggers, and they're tough to get back. So to say somebody's going to come back from their first game and then wager units on a person with a hamstring, hard for me.
Yeah. All I heard was you just talked about kind of hearing things. I heard everybody going to their laptops or their phones and betting Trenton Irwin props.
They should.
I just looked for his lines. I couldn't find them.
They're off in some places. I noticed that the Trenton Irwin props aren't available on some books, so that's super interesting to me.
Well, think about it. Sia. Now they're both 2s, right? They're backups, right? So they're going against the 1's offense together. So Browning has more familiarity with a backup receiver than he does with Jamar Chase.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My converse argument to T. Higgins, because I understand everything everybody's saying about the hamstring and about the reps. He's just such a big target for a young quarterback. And we know how young quarterbacks like to look for their tight ends, for example. Oh, by the way, Tanner Hudson caught 4 or 5 balls last week with Jake Browning. I feel like T. Higgins functions like that, especially in the short area where I anticipate most of the passes being. I feel like T. Higgins is going to be kind of that safety blanket in much the same way a big tight end will be. So that's sort of where I'm going with the 3.5. And also he's extremely talented, obviously.
It's a good thing to watch. It's a good thing to watch T. Higgins in the first quarter. Number one, watch how many reps that he's in on. And number two, and it's tough with the camera angles, watch the routes that he's running, right? Sure. Like, is he running a 3 to 5, hitch route, or is he going deep? Are they using him just to get live reps of just conditioning, right? Like,
no.
No. See? Yeah.
Not in a contract year. T can make that call too. He can be like, I think I want to sit this one out. I mean, he's a competitor. He's probably not going to do that, but he's got a lot of money on the line. I think he's going out there to show out, frankly.
I do too. I mean, I think that's maybe part of the issue with he might be pushing it too early because you're going to get these numbers up. We're talking about he's probably going to make between $15 and $20 million, right? Or he was in line for that, probably now between 12 and 18. So I mean, you're telling me that you wouldn't go out there and push it tonight?
Yeah, I don't know. I might personally, I might sit out because I think everybody knows what my stock is, and I don't think I need to prove anything to anybody. But that's just me. He's more of a competitor. He's on a football team. I get him wanting to be out on the field.
Uncle Toradol is taking care of that. I need that 15 milli, son.
Well, it depends on your statistics, because I'm gonna. You guys talk about fade. I'm saying if I'm a general manager, if you come on a visit and you have 42 catches for 600 yards and 3 touchdowns. You're not getting the offer that you were going to get if you were at 110 catch. So statistics, you don't think that they're slotted by who makes what? That's the way the world works. That's just the way it is.
I feel like if you're as good as T. Higgins, I don't think you have to worry about that as much when you're negotiating your contract. With that said, let's move on to maybe a first touchdown score in T. Higgins. Oh, I don't know. You saw the picks that we had, our official picks, and we talked about it pays to watch live picks too. I think that Dearness Johnson play is pretty strong. Let's talk about the gem, though. Let's get these picks up there, AB. We only have so much time left. And listen, I got to be honest here. So I was able to get my pick in relatively early. You guys know I don't usually go for the shorter numbers. It's usually plus 1,800 or longer. But I really wanted this one. And you know who else really wanted it? Kenzie, which makes me feel even better about my pick. She has a pick she believes in as well, but I'll just full disclosure, she liked this pick as well. I got the pick in a little earlier. I like Evan Ingram here, no touchdowns, but Trevor Lawrence is very aware of the lack of touchdowns. He even mentioned it before last game that he needs to get Evan Ingram in the end zone. He had him wide open in the end zone, and he threw it like 2 miles away from him somehow. So I think payback is coming in a first touchdown for Evan Ingram. Really like this one. Plus 1,100. It's plus 1,200 in some places too. So big fan of that one. AB, who do you have for first touchdown?
Yeah, I'm going with Zay Jones here, and I'm going to kind of use the Jacoby Myers philosophy that he's the guy that just gets lost on the field because you kind of forget that he's there, right? So I'm going to roll with Zay Jones on this one. And look, I'm going to stop talking because Ken's real quick inside the lines. All right. What time? Where can we find the show? Let us know.
Yeah, so now we're weekdays, same channel, SportsLine YouTube. You'll find us in the same playlist, Inside the Lines at 1 p.m. This is a really, really good time early in the week to pay attention to these episodes because we're telling you what lines to act now on, where the steam is moving, predicting where the steam will be by Thursday, Sunday, Monday, so that you can get ahead of those lines, get the best value. We'll start talking about college football playoff early, recognizing steam, knowing when to lay off, for example. I think people are hedging Alabama right now. They're trying to make that line small so they can hammer the other side with Michigan. So don't fall for that right now. Wait for Michigan to become a bigger favorite again if you like Bama. Things like that. We are teaching you a lot early in the week. We'll hit some props later in the week, but we're all about that line movement and educating everyone to help them with the best value.
That it was a really interesting comment, and I am very intrigued by this show. Of course, I've seen it, but everybody else, if you haven't seen it, set your alerts. It's the same YouTube page, right, Kenzie?
Right.
As the Early Edge. Okay, yeah. Set your alerts for so you get all of our shows, not just Inside the Lines. By the way, I'm checking the likes, almost up to 500, 420, not bad. We've got 3 times as many people watching. But Kenzie, speaking of steam, the steam's coming from you because you came in here, you hit a home run on your first at bat, on your first swing, as a matter of fact. Who's the first touchdown scorer in this Jags-Cincinnati Monday Night Football game?
You know what? I was in between Evan Ingram and Trevor Lawrence, and I was really couldn't decide. So it helps me that you took Evan from me. I still like him anytime touchdown here as well. I will go with Trevor Lawrence here. Again, he's getting comfortable with his legs. We've talked about it all night. I'm not going to, repeat what we've been saying, but 3 rushing touchdowns in the past 2 games. Take command early, take control yourself. If things aren't looking great with Etienne, I think he's prepared and comfortable knowing the game script possibly here. If there's a defense to do this against, I think it is the Bengals defense. So I like him to be the first guy in the end zone.
Look, if if Trevor Lawrence runs one in, obviously that helps both of us. I'll trade a turkey leg for Lawrence to get a rushing attempt and run it in.
No, nobody wants your old botulism turkey leg, man. I think
nobody wants a turkey leg. You can celebrate it all you want. Thanksgiving was then. This is now.
Yeah, this isn't medieval times. You don't want a turkey leg.
Speaking of now, Coach Phil, I almost called you Uncle Phil for some reason. Shout out to Uncle Phil from the.
I love that guy, man. I wish I was him.
Oh, he's amazing. Best TV dad of all time, in my
opinion.
Doubt. Coach Phil, if you have a TV dad you like, put it in the chat. Coach Phil, we haven't talked a lot about Joe Mixon. Plead your case here. Make your argument.
Yeah, so just, plus 1,000, Joe Mixon. I was thinking just with the interceptions that are probable when you have a young quarterback or inexperienced quarterback, you get down there, you might be more conservative down in the red zone rather than trying to fit some of these angle posts in there and these bang eights to some of the wideouts. Just hand the ball off to Big Joe Mixon and let him plow over the goal line and do that silly little dance he has. I do like all your picks. It's not as fun when I don't have EC or some other character in here. So I like all you guys on this thing. I like Zay. I coach Zay Jones. You know that, AB?
Did you really? Yeah.
Twice at ECU and with the Bills. He caught 158 passes in one season for me at ECU. Set the NCAA, still has the record. So I would not be upset with that. T-Law, I love to play, and Evan Ingram, just to see CA get 6 gems would be cool. But why not get the big fella one over there and get that Mixon dance going a little bit tonight?
Zay Jones, a very underappreciated receiver. My first year on the Early Edge, which would have been, I guess, 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, however you want to do the math there, I was betting a lot of Zay Jones props, a lot of his overs when he was on the Raiders. And I just thought he was a guy that got so unnoticed, so unrecognized. Real quick, Phil, pretty good receiver, right?
He's one of the hardest working human beings I've ever been around. He's a kind person. He's like great to everyone's kids, like in the facility. So he's just like one of the most exemplary people that you could be around. And then what he does is he ingratiates himself so well to these quarterbacks. They stay after. They're there, so they're throwing, and they just love this guy. So then when the live bullets hit, guess who gets the ball? Zay, because he got out there early and threw with Trevor, or at the time it was Derek Carr in the Raiders when you're talking about. And he really does a great job of doing those types of things, the extra work that we all need to do in life, really.
That's a veteran move too. Getting in with the quarterback. Yeah, that's a veteran move. Yeah.
Being a good person and working hard, that pays off. Who'd have thunk that? All right, we got to get out of here because we got this game. However, before we get out of here, AP, let's go back to the portion. I want to ask everybody here, we've got like 15 seconds or less. What's the one thing you're looking forward to in this game? Cincinnati, Jacksonville, AB, you're going to start.
Cincinnati, first half. Can they get offense going? Can they get points on the board? If they can, this is going to be an amazing betting night for all bettors out there, because as we all know, blowouts lead to unders. You want a back and forth affair. And yeah, Cincinnati needs it. Like I thought Ken's had the quote of the night. All these reps, they're so important.
Ken, nice lead into you. What's your thing you're looking forward to the most in this game?
I'll say two things that are intriguing. One being looking at Jake Browning's rushing props earlier today, over 12.5. Now, last week he had 40 yards. I'm assuming that's because he was still figuring out this offense, still trying to get reps with his receivers. So maybe that was why he reverted to staying on the ground. Curious to see if there's a tendency to do that again, and then maybe next week look into a prop like that. So interested to see how that goes. One other note I want to mention, Steven and I were running the numbers hypothetically if the Jags were to win tonight. Sorry. All right. If the Jags were to win tonight, they move to a 17% chance to have the AFC 1 seed in our SportsLine simulation. If they lose, 4% chance to have the 1 seed. So this really is for all the marbles. If they want to stay in the race to have the spy, which I think they obviously do, they got to treat this game like it's major playoff implications here.
Yeah, technically control their own destiny. Coach Phil.
Yeah, the run game of the Bengals. If they cannot run the football tonight and they're forced to just drop back and pass with a backup quarterback, it's going to be a long night. So look to see if Mixon is effective early. If he's not, then I think the game script will be Jags. If they can run the football, control it, and have some balance and play action pass, I think we're going to be in for a ball game.
Absolutely. It's obscure, but the thing I'm looking forward to the most, I want to see Jake Browning succeed. I want to see one of these backup quarterbacks. I know some have succeeded, but I want to really see him succeed because I think he has sort of observed the process that I would want him to observe. Most quarterbacks, they get thrust in because of injury, because they're a prospect in their first year, in their second year. He's been holding an iPad for 3-4 years now, coming out of Washington with a lot of experience. I just want to see him do well because I think pre-snap, he's got the tools. And I think post-snap, he knows what he's doing. So I'm hoping for a competitive game. Well, we had a competitive show for sure. This was an awesome show. Love having Kenzie on. Love having Coach Phil as usual and AB. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for hitting the like button. Thanks for being so active in the chat. There's only one thing left to do. You've got your marching orders. Let's take all of these tickets straight to the pay window. For Kenzie, for AB, for Coach Phil, I am the counselor. This is the Early Edge, and we rest our case.